to another episode of the Playing in the Sandbox podcast, where we are deeply committed to inspiring action in today's leaders. And in the sandbox today, I'm actually tackling a topic that I think a lot of you struggle with. Leaders that I know struggle with the idea of being wrong. So what if you're wrong? So what if you're wrong? And for your employees, for your team members, so what if they're wrong? This conversation today is going to shift some perspectives. I know it, and open up your mind's eye to what's possible in your team and in your work environment when it comes to that F word, failure. What if you're wrong, friend? Let's get into the sandbox. Let's check out this new episode. And before you step into the sandbox, before you take your shoes off and get comfy, I want you to head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast to download your copy of today's action plan. Because in there is going to be some more detailed steps for you to shift some thinking and get your mindset adjusted around the idea as a leader about being wrong. Because the way you approach being wrong influences at a 10x proportion your team members and how they approach being wrong too. So head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast, get that action plan, kick your shoes off. Let's get into So What If You're Wrong? I'll see you in the sandbox. Hey leader, welcome into the sandbox for today's exciting conversation about so what if you're wrong? I mean, think about that for a minute. How many times have you been wrong? How many times might you be wrong in the future? So what? It happened again. Now what are you going to do about it? Well, first and foremost, friend, it's time to get comfortable with the fear of disappointment and the fear and disappointment of being wrong. Let's just start there. Let's dive into that for a minute, because that's really what's driving the whole momentum around, oh my gosh, I'm wrong. Or for your team members, one of my greatest pet peeves, and I teach this over and over because it's a core value of mine, which is personal responsibility. Take ownership, take personal responsibility of who you are, right? It aligns with my integrity and it aligns with my self-respect and core value. But that take ownership, take personal responsibility is actually at the core of the fear of being wrong. See, when we can't take personal ownership for ourselves, it's really hard for us with team members around us. And let's say you've got a blame shifter on the team, right? They don't take personal responsibility or personal ownership when things don't work out because they fear, right? Not only disappointing you, but they fear the disappointment in themselves of being wrong. And you know what? Here's the real truth of the matter. We are all going to be wrong probably over the course of a week, just as many times as we're going to be right. Now, you might live in a box and you might not actually really communicate with other people, and you're only really leading yourself, which is great. I always say lead yourself well. So maybe you don't have the same experience with being wrong, or maybe you just don't have anyone that you trust in your circle or inner circle that's telling you and exposing those times when you are, because you fear it so greatly. If I just insulate myself, then I don't have to worry about ever being wrong. And here's the reality of it. I mean, I'll share a story. I'll share my own story because I like to do that. I may as well share about myself because, why not? I used to fear being wrong so much, and I had a blame shift lifestyle. I did in my early years, in my younger years, it was always other people. It was never me. And it is one thing, and all of my kids will tell you this. That is one thing that irritates me. Just take ownership, own it. I don't care if you ate it. I don't care if you broke it. I'd rather hear it from you first. I don't care if you're failing the class. I want to hear it from you first before I hear it from the teacher or somebody else. If I have to hear it from somebody else, then we have a bigger problem, because now I get to resolve the issue that you didn't come forward and own it for yourself, and the issue of whatever it is that you did that got us into this situation. So that fear of being wrong for me was always about, I had to cover up so much growing up in my early years of life. I had to cover up because of the chaos around me. I always wanted to make sure it looked like I was perfect. And when I was in my earliest years of parenting and I was a single parent, I was so afraid that people would call out something that my kids did. I went to an extreme, and I grieve it even still to this day. It's a true story. I actually grieve that there were things that I tried to show that we were never wrong. We were never out of order. The kids were always good kids. We never had any problems. That I missed a lot of those early years as a parent with my kids, as a single parent, because I was fearful of disappointing others, of even disappointing my kids. And ultimately, it impacted us and still even impacts us in our relationships today. As much as I know how to build healthy relationships and communicate effectively, my two of my most precious relationships have negatively been impacted because of my own fear of being wrong, or of the disappointment of being wrong. And it's part of, I believe, what has pushed me in my professional career over these last 25 years to really shift how I operate, and how I have such an incredible drive and passion to uproot this fear of being wrong and just own it. When you own it, then we can move on. When we avoid it, we stay stuck in it, and it continues to fester and boil and become a problem for us, whatever that it is, whatever that issue is. So the importance of embracing our mistakes is really about, let's look at them as opportunities. The importance as a parent of helping your child to embrace their mistakes as opportunities for learning, right? For personal development and growth is key to their health and success. I miss that in the early years, and I can't go back and do different on that now, that I wish I would have done different then, that I didn't know what I know until now, right? I needed to actually go through that and understand that that fear of being wrong, and this is why it's such a hot topic for me, that fear of being wrong or exposed. It was the exposure, right? What are people going to say? What's my grandmother going to say? I remember I used that one a lot back in the early years. So I don't know, poor grandma. I mean, she didn't do anything other than I just respected her. And what if, that fear of disappointment and letting people down. And I missed the embracing the mistakes that I made as learning opportunities. I figured it out later, but it took me a long time. So there's a psychological impact that I wanted to dive into a little bit with you about the fear of being wrong. And it can vary widely. Research varies widely on what that impact is around being wrong. But depending on your individual personalities, depending on your experiences, those past experiences that influence our thinking today, and they influence the way we look at the world today, um, it sets up the context for for how we look at mistakes, right? How we look at errors. But there are several common psychological responses that people might experience when they realize they've been wrong. And why is this important? Because when I can get this into your hand, leader, as a tool, it helps you to open yourself up to the questions to ask when you have a team member who's rejecting being wrong, who's blame shifting, and who's always pointing fingers and exposing other people, but never reflecting back on themselves. So that's what we're really about today, because if you have a fear of being wrong, 9 times out of 10, your team members are 10 times that with the fear of being wrong, because they don't want to disappoint you. And so we all have to walk around with this, Facebook perfect lifestyle that we know is false, but we have to walk around as though it's perfect because we don't want to be exposed, right? So what we want to understand is this fear of being wrong creates this cognitive dissonance. And this cognitive dissonance, it's when people hold a strong belief or opinion, right? And are confronted with evidence that contradicts it. And they may experience cognitive dissonance as a state of mental discomfort caused by holding conflicting ideas simultaneously. So we've got conflicting ideas at the same time, and it creates this tension, right? And it can lead to feelings of confusion and frustration and anxiety. So the fear of being wrong creates a cognitive dissonance. So how do we resolve that? Well, before we get there, let's move into some of the other things this psychological factors of the fear of being wrong creates. Self-doubt. Self-doubt is a big one. Being wrong can trigger feelings of doubt. I'm a failure. I never. Uncertainty in my own abilities or the abilities of others, and judgment of that, right? And it can erode the confidence and the self-esteem, and potentially lead to a negative and impact on the overall well-being. So that's self-doubt is also a contributor. The embarrassment and shame. We don't teach people, y'all. We don't teach people how to move through embarrassment and shame. And it becomes this huge, it builds this energy in most people if they don't know how to handle it in a healthy way. That fear of being wrong, um, making mistakes, it triggers those feelings of embarrassment and shame, especially in social and professional settings. Hey, I can shout that one from the rooftop. I know the feeling of that one, especially in the professional settings. And that we can also term that a little bit as the common buzzword right now is the oh golly, and there I just lost it. So I'll come back to it. So the common thing to think about there with that embarrassment and shame and that fear of judgment can intensify the emotions, and it can cause a withdrawal of behaviors, right? It's that imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome can set in, and I can relate to imposter syndrome. I'll tell you what, I know I lived with that for a long time. And even still today, I think I have some of that little lingering feelings in certain scenarios based on past experiences, right? So, what if you're wrong? Also can lead to, from a psychological safety perspective, from a psychological well-being perspective, it actually attacks in that fear of failure. And it's that being wrong might reinforce the fear of failure, making individuals hesitant to take risks. So if you have somebody on your team that doesn't take risks, tap into them through questions around what's their experience with failure, right? Talk to me about when you failed. What'd you do? How'd you overcome it? Right? That's a big one. One of my other big ones, when people fear failure or fear being wrong, so they don't take risks, they don't step out there, is so when have you seen this happen before? Like, when have you experienced this that you're fearing, whatever the it is? Ask them, when have you experienced that before? Many times people will say, well, I never have. I've just always feared it. Okay, so you have no evidence of it. So what causes the fear? Usually they can tie it to they've seen somebody else experience it. Well, then you can speak to that, and it gets it off of the individual. It gets it out of them, and it goes to the root cause that's causing that fear of failure in them, right? When you can unpack that for your people, oh, leader, that is a gold mine of opportunity. And it just comes with a few well placed questions. Here's one of the other psychological aspects of the fear of being wrong is that resistance to change. It also is tied in with anxiety and stress around the, you know, realization of being wrong can induce stress and anxiety, particularly when it has a significant consequence or implications. And we'll see this in people who delay their project timelines. They're always late. That fear of starting a project because I don't want to do it wrong, and I don't know that I can do it. I don't know that I can do it perfectly, and somehow they think perfect is the expectation, and so when they don't know that, they don't know how to launch, right? So that's that fear and that anxiety, that resistance to change, that admitting that my mistake, this is a big one, right? This is part of that personal responsibility, friend. Admitting that my mistake it might actually require me to change, right? My mistake might actually cause me to have to go, oh, wow, maybe I should look at that a little bit different. And I say don't should all over yourselves, but maybe I want to. It would be a value, and you as a leader get to help your people. Why am I going through all of the psychological aspects of the fear of being wrong? Is because you as a leader get it right with yourself, and then you can open up to working with your people to help them through it as well. Because if you have it, the person to your left and or right probably has the same fear of being wrong, especially if they're on your team, right? I said that before. It's important that you know that. If you have it, your team members have it, and then you're impacting the productivity for everyone. And is that really what you want at the end of the day or the beginning of the day? No, I know the answer to that. The other aspect to the psychological component of the fear of being wrong or the fear of failure is the impact on relationships, because we will affect or impact it will affect or impact our interpersonal relationships in the workplace. And as individuals, we can get defensive, we can blame shift, point fingers, blame others, distance ourselves, and that actually causes a ripple effect that has really critical impact. It has an impact to the relationships in the team. It has an impact that For the people that see it that might have exposed, hey, here's the problem, and you were actually incorrect, you were wrong, it impacts the relationship with that individual, and it also impacts that person that brought it forward, that they don't want to ever bring stuff forward again. And that's a scary thing in my mind on teams. When we have people that don't want to bring up what's not working, they don't want to bring up what's wrong, they don't want to bring up what's broken. When we don't have that, then we're not actually working at our highest best use and self. We're actually hindering our performance because we never want to talk about what's not working, because I don't want someone to feel bad because they might be wrong. See how that works, right? So that impact on relationship and the fear of what that ripple effect is for people is really huge. The other thing is overcompensation. I thought this was a really good one, and I was doing some research on it. There are individuals that might respond to being wrong by overcompensating and attempting to prove themselves. And I cannot. That's so hard for me to handle. Am I like, if I could see you now, I'd be like, who could raise their hand on that with me, right? Give me a high five. Are you with me? Because they then go into seeking perfection in their following subsequent efforts, right? So they'll overcompensate, and that causes problems instead of just addressing the issue as simply and saying, yep, I was wrong. What do we need to do to fix it? And how do we move on? Right. There's also the last and final of the psychological piece, which I think is a big one for folks, is that loss of control. I know that that is huge. I know it's been a big one for me over the course of my life, that need to control. And it comes from the want for safety and the drive to create safety in my every environment and every place that I'm at, because I need the safety so that I can be free to be me. And that control helps me to do that. And when you live with someone who has severe mental illness, when you live with someone who maybe has depression, when you live with someone who maybe is struggling with addiction, there are reasons and needs to control your environment for your own personal safety. But what happens when it's tied to that loss of control is tied to the so what if I'm wrong? It's that realizing that one's mistakes can evoke different feelings of that loss of control, and that how we work through it is important because it can be very distressing based on outside circumstances, even. So, the awareness of these 9, and these are going to be in your after action plan. So, head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast to get your copy of this. I've got these steps listed out because these all open you up to understanding your people better, so that you can help them to embrace being wrong. But then it comes back to, how do you embrace being wrong, right? We understand the psychological implications of being wrong, the fear of being wrong. Got it. So what? And I say that, so what if you're wrong? Because I believe people dwell too long on what's wrong, and they don't move into but what's right. And they don't move there quick enough, right? As leaders, embracing mistakes as opportunities is actually what gets us to move more swiftly through being wrong to what's right and what's working. Really important learning opportunity for you there, to just from a personal development piece. It's crucial to foster a culture of growth and innovation and resilience within your team and your organization. And some of the ways that you do that, they're pretty simple. It's just a matter of you setting the tone from the top, making it okay for people to be wrong, making it okay for people to fail, shift perspective on fail, creating a safe environment where people feel free to speak up, that there is something very wrong in our team. There is something very wrong in this system or this structure. And I want to be able to talk about it. And it might be your pet project that they want to talk about, what's not working. But if you have the right people on your team that are advocating for your best, highest use, your best, highest self, and their own at the same time, right? We hold each other in the highest possible regard. We create safe environments for people to speak up and acknowledge when they're wrong and acknowledge when something's not working. We make it okay and create safety, and we shift perspective on failure to being an opportunity for us, right? It promotes a mindset that views failure as a stepping stone to our success. And there are some great things written about it and quotes out there about, if around, if we're not failing, we're really not succeeding, because we're not trying hard, we're not risking things. Let's make failure okay. let's make being wrong okay, because they go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other, friend, right? Another key important factor in this is to think about encouraging folks to reflect and analyze, right? Encourage your team members to reflect on their past mistakes and analyze what went wrong, what caused it, why did it go wrong, not the who, right? I don't want it to be who, I want to be why. Remember, you've heard me say this before, take it off the person and personality, put it on a behavior. In this case, you're taking it off of a personality and you're putting it on what's the mistake or the outcome. If not this, then what? If we don't want this, what do we want? And it helps people to identify patterns and root causes and potential areas for improvement. When we take time to reflect and analyze when something breaks, what caused it to break, what do we want to do with it? Also, the great question to ask, friend, is it broke. Does that mean we still want to fix it? Right? I'm wrong. Am I pushing something too hard that's not going to serve our bigger picture toward our goal and our core purpose? When we can pause and step back and reflect and analyze that, it even shifts it from, well, then being wrong is actually a celebration. Let's celebrate it, because the feedback we just got through that feedback loop that we just created in that analysis and being reflective helped to highlight, right? It helped to highlight the learning opportunity for us, and we can celebrate that, right? So taking time to reflect, highlighting the learning process, what worked, what didn't, what do we want to do? If not this, then what, right? Providing open feedback. And here's a big one, y'all. Don't take it personally. Refuse to take it personally. Now, these are just some of the pieces that I wanted to dive into, because the big piece that I want to go over with you right now in just real short time is this. When you can offer development opportunities to your people to understand and get comfortable with being wrong, and I've got tools for you to help you with that. If you don't know, there are many out there. All you need to do is do a Google search and you can find them. But here's the piece: lead by example, model, own it. When you're wrong, say it up front. When you've made a mistake, own it, say it up front. When you see that someone else has made a mistake, you know what? Pull them in and say, hey, I noticed that you made a mistake here, and or this failed, or this went wrong. I want to understand your process of how you got from where you started to where it ended. And what do you want to do to fix it? And you make it safe for people to dialogue. You're not berating them. You're leading by example, how to handle a failure or how to handle being wrong. That's the way that we can start to adapt as a team, as individuals, and as a strong leader. And we start to shift the mindset from a fear of being wrong to embracing the possibilities of what happens when I'm wrong. So, what if you're wrong? It happens. And it happens to people who are challenging the status quo. And it happens to people who are pushing limits. And it happens to people who are highly successful individuals and aware of the power of being wrong. Use it as a power tool. It's a secret power. Like, put your cape on, friend. Put your cape on, use it as a strength, and go after being wrong with a new vision and a new mindset for growth, a new opportunity to challenge yourself and your team members to new levels. By doing this, you're going to cultivate the team. You're going to cultivate that soil that everybody's rooted in your company, to grow into an extraordinary new opportunity. So, what if you're wrong? Make it a great day. Hey, thank you so much for coming into the sandbox today. My hope is that you're leaving with some new tools, tips, and strategies to navigate your personal leadership, your team leadership, and your next bold conversation. And hey, it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment and share this episode with a friend or a colleague that you think could truly benefit from what we shared in the sandbox here today. Third-party affirmations go a long way in today's world economy, and I would be honored if you took a moment to share the value that you gained from spending time in the sandbox. And don't forget to head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast and click on today's episode to download your copy of the action plan. And remember, friend, leadership is not something that you've been born with. It's something that you grow into. And I want to honor and celebrate you for taking the time today to grow into your next level of leadership in the sandbox. Make it a great day.